What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the Amir Zen Show. On today's episode, we have Jason Bassler, who is the co-founder of the Free Thought Project, which has exposed numerous incidents of corruption from domestic and global government authorities. Jason has been featured in such publications like Rolling Stone, Reason, InfoWars, RT, and The Tom Woods Show. Bassler is also the founder of Police the Police, which is an awesome place to be on the internet. You should check it out. He was called one of the most extensive recorders of law enforcement misbehaviors in America by Rolling Stone magazine, and is known for uncovering police brutality, misconduct, and abuse of authority, as well as government corruption. Mr. Jason Bassler, how are you doing today?
Good, brother. Thank you so much for having me on. I feel honored to be following the GOAT, Ron Paul, and his trusty sidekick, Mr. Daniel Adams. So thank you for having me as the third guest on the new show, man. I feel so loved and appreciated. Thank you.
It's a pleasure and honor to have you on. Thank you for being on, and looking forward to an awesome conversation today, starting with the Free Thought Project, which I've personally been a fan of for many years. And seeing your years and years of work with the Free Thought Project and seeing its growth has been pretty amazing to see, especially since you've kept going through many of the negative instances that have happened with the Free Thought Project that we'll get to. In my mind, the Free Thought Project is arguably one of the biggest freedom and truth-based platforms in internet history. But like I said, it hasn't come without its fair share of problems. So could you tell me about the history of Free Thought Project and, go over that one time where you literally got erased from the internet, essentially overnight?
Yeah, absolutely, brother, for sure. And thank you for the kind words there. Once again, appreciated. It has been a long, arduous journey. More recently, we've been hacked. I think I shared with you that off air here, but we lost both of our Facebook pages. It wasn't bad enough already with Facebook, but I'm sure we'll get into that. So the Free Thought Project, I feel like I've always had some type of counterculture in my blood. I've always been an activist from an early age, and I might not have really understood my own ideology at a young age, but being somebody who was born and raised in the Bay Area, particularly Santa Cruz, California, which is kind of like a surf skater town. It's just the mentality, man, especially you're growing up in the skateboard scene. There's punk rock, you have, different music influences, and kind of helped shape me into the person who I was. But somewhere around my early to mid 20s was right around the time of the Iraq War, right when that was starting. And I certainly was very active. I was in the streets of San Francisco, living in San Francisco at the time. I was down there. I was doing it all. I was trying to voice my opinion about the situation, which was, oh man, it was terrible. I remember when the bomb started dropping, it was so jarring and shocking as someone who hadn't really lived through a significant war at that period of time. But all of it really came to a head actually about a decade after that, in 2011, when the Occupy Wall Street movement started to kick off in New York. And that was more or less the catalyst that made me realize that I didn't have a firm grasp on my own philosophy or ideology, my own political ideology. So at that point, I had already been using the internet for years. I was somebody who was familiar with social media. I was using MySpace, and even before that, Friendster. So social media was part of my lexicon already. But I was getting really involved with Occupy Wall Street movement. I was trying to get myself involved with protests that were going on in the Hollywood area where I was living at the time. And during that period of time, I found Mr. Ron Paul, your first guest on this podcast. And I feel so blessed to have found him during that time period, because I was kind of lost in the sea of uncertainty as far as my own ideology. I knew I was I was anti-establishment. I knew that there was things that the ruling class were doing that was unacceptable. But Ron Paul really helped me form my own ideologies through reading his books, through watching his videos. And of course, at that time, that was right around 2012 when he was running for the presidential election. He was running as president of the United States. And I should probably mention that during that time, I also saw Ron Paul at UCLA at a big event that was hosted by none other than you and I think the group of libertarians that you're working with at UCLA at the time. So, big thanks to you as well. You helped kind of formulate that and really cement in my own appreciation for the GOAT himself. But yeah, man. So at that point, I knew I had to get involved. And with my social media background, standing on the street corner with signs and doing banner hangs and stuff like that just didn't feel effective enough. I felt like I could be reaching more people through the internet. And so I turned to just creating a couple Facebook pages and a couple Tumblr accounts, if I'm going to be completely honest. And I know nobody really
just to show how old this is, you know?
Yeah, right. Nobody uses Tumblr anymore, but at one point it was actually pretty legit. So, yeah, I created a couple pages called Get Involved, You Live Here. And that brand didn't necessarily go very far, but it was kind of the catalyst. It was like, all right, I know I need to be doing something. I know I need to be motivating other people to be doing something. And during that same time, I was watching these protests happening in New York and across the country, even San Francisco, as I mentioned, Los Angeles. I mean, most major cities had these Occupy Wall Street protests. During that time, I was watching the police very heavy-handed, very aggressive, very brutal with the protesters. And it was shocking to me. It raised a red flag. I was somebody who was naive at that point. I was always told, and I guess genuinely believed that police were here to protect and serve us. So seeing them, basically trample our rights, be overly aggressive, it lit a fire inside of me. And I knew I had to do something. And I didn't know exactly what, but at that time, I made a vow to myself that I was going to do whatever I could to hold police accountable. So shortly after, in 2012, I created Police the Police to document and archive police brutality, misconduct, and abuse of authority. And very shortly, within a very short period of time, started to blow up, started getting really big reach. Turns out that there was a lot of people very interested in the police accountability scene, flavored from a libertarian lens. And I think there was police accountability organizations before that, but they were more leftist in nature, a lot of leftist rhetoric and kind of couched in more leftist positions. And so people like ourselves, people on the right, people maybe even in the middle, knew that there was a growing problem with police militarization, the police state, the DOD 1033 program, transferring police, the military equipment that wasn't being used. I mean, all these things were huge red flags. So all of a sudden, we had a huge audience. We had thousands of people coming to our page. We had hundreds of thousands of people within a very short period of time. We eventually ended up growing that page to about 1.9 million followers. And it was the largest police accountability conversation anywhere on the internet. So, and I should also mention, right around that time, 2013, myself and Mr. Matt Agarist, who you should definitely have on the show at some point. He and I decided to create the Free Thought Project. We were already working for an outlet, a news outlet. We didn't really care for it. We knew that we could be doing our own thing with more of like a libertarian anarchist type of focus to it. And so we created the Free Thought Project. And again, within the first year, it started to blow up. I think within the first year or so, we were actually within the top 300 websites in the country. Right around discovery.com, which, is pretty huge. I mean, if that was to be the case, in 2025, we'd probably be millionaires. But back in 2013, it was significant, but it wasn't quite as significant as it was now, or as it is now, I should say. So
yeah, this was like early internet virality, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Some of your earliest virality that we saw on the internet.
And I should also mention this was during the internet golden age, golden period, where we weren't dealing with the same censorship that we deal with now. We weren't dealing with the shadow bans, the blocks, the algorithms, all that stuff. This was much more organic. It was much better place to build an organization online. And we were very much influenced by people like Dan Dix, Luke Radowski, Adam Kokesh, that's just kind of the citizen journalist type of approach, like, hey, we might not be anybody, but we have the internet, we have the camera, we have our keyboards. Like, we can do something to create some awareness about these topics. So yeah, we were reaching millions of people. I know it sounds crazy now, but most weeks it was an upward of like 30 to 40 million people reached a week, sometimes more than that. Usually around 20 to 30,000 fans a week we were gaining. So these numbers are astronomical. Like, you don't even think of them now as being legitimate because they're not. Like, the algorithms have kind of gamed the system, so they won't let things go as viral as they used to, unless, of course, you're on TikTok or something like that. But yeah, we're very much the pioneers of alternative media. But that all changed around 2017, about a year after Trump came in. Of course, the fake news narrative followed him, and it became very challenging to start to have reach on some of these big tech platforms. And by early 2018, Alex Jones was deplatformed across the board from several different social media sites. And we said it. We called it a few months before it happened. We said, we're going to be next. And we were. And in October of 2018, both Facebook and Twitter censored us on the same day within hours of each other, resulting in a net loss of nearly 6 million fans altogether in our network. They removed about 50 of our pages that were either pages that we owned or we were networking with as editors or admins on their pages. And altogether, Facebook took down around 850 pages or accounts during what's been dubbed the Purge now. So yeah, and since then, Amir, it's been pretty challenging. When that happened, we had to let go of our whole entire staff. We were able to accrue quite a team.
Yeah, just to give a little more context, can you just add a little more context to how big the Free Thought Project was? Like, you guys had multiple different employees. This was a legit company that was directly competing with the mainstream media, the MSNBCs, Fox, CNN. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall online you were doing higher numbers than the mainstream media was doing online towards the end. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, I talk about this often when I do interviews because it's like the whole social media ecosphere got flipped upside down. And of course, it was intentional. Of course, this was collaborated, this was coordinated. But yeah, you would go to a CNN, an ABC, a CBS type of Facebook page, and it'd be dead. It'd be a ghost town. There wouldn't be any likes, there wouldn't be any shares, maybe one or two comments here and there. You go to alternative platforms like We Are Change, the Free Thought Project, the Anti-Media, Press for Truth, and there'd be hundreds, there'd be thousands of likes, there'd be thousands of shares, there'd be hundreds of comments. People were hungry for this information. There was a uh, very organic flow to it back then where we were able to share each other's content. We were able to network, and the audience loved it because they were finding new avenues of information. They were expanding their consciousness, counterintuitive information. I mean, all this stuff. And yeah, to your point there, we had, I think it was 7 or 8 different employees who were writing for us, just writers. Because of course, back then articles were actually being read. People would read a little bit more back then before video took over social media completely. And each of our writers, they were brilliant, man. All of them had kind of their own niche. Some were about the drug war or the benefits and possibilities of psychedelics. Some were focused more on geopolitics. Matt Agaris was focused more on the agorism side, but it all kind of covered this broad spectrum of what the Free Thought Project stood for. And it was conspiracy theories. It was pushing back against the police state. It was ending the drug war. All the things that we don't talk about now, unfortunately, because of all the culture wars infecting the conversations and the algorithms really pushing and promoting that stuff. But yeah, we had a social media team. I think there was 3 of us on the social media team. In 2017, a year before the Purge, we actually reached nearly 1 billion views with both our pages, the Free Thought Project and the Free Thought Project.
To put it to perspective, just to put into perspective for the people who are listening right now, that was almost 10 years ago. So this was before the era that the international community had their cell phones on social media in abundance like they do today. This was a time where social media engagement, it wasn't full of bots like we have today. You see just things that have millions and millions of views and you could easily just get bots. This was a completely different era in the internet. And to your point, everything did seem to kind of shift overnight after that purge happened.
Indeed. And, we just recently had the ex-Rolling Stone journalist, award-winning journalist, Matt Taibbi on our podcast. And he confirmed all of that, man. He confirmed that, well, he was the one Elon Musk handled the Twitter files. And so he was the one going through all those emails and all that information. And we were directly targeted by a few different organizations that more or less have direct ties to the U.S. government. The Digital Research Forensic Lab and the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council is basically the who's who of all the worst of the worst in the country. I won't bore your audience with all those details. Certainly look up the Atlantic Council if you're interested. But he more or less, Matt Taibbi more or less confirmed that was basically the test run, because about a year later, a little over a year later, was COVID. And, there wasn't enough pushback. There wasn't enough people actively speaking out about our purge, our pages being taken down, or, anything that happened before or after that. And I think the assumption is that the ruling class just realized, hey, like, this is fair game. This is something that can be accomplished. We could quell the outrage. We could minimize with our algorithms, we could minimize, anybody who's speaking out about it. So, but yeah, man, it has been a very rocky, rough road trying to get back on track. Honestly, I don't know if it's ever going to be, I don't think it's ever going to be the same stature that it once was with our reach and following. Again, we've just been targeted. We've been blacklisted. We've had several different reiterations of the pages go up, which immediately started building a following again. And then Facebook takes it back down. Twitter takes it back down. And that's happened several times. And as I mentioned almost 20 minutes ago now, sorry, I've been rambling for so long. We got hacked just in the beginning of the year. And once again, Facebook is doing nothing to help us establish, the credibility and the admin role on those pages. So it's been tough, man. It's been tricky. But
this is after Zuck said that he's going to free up how Meta works, right?
Yeah, after he said he'd get rid of the fact checkers, after he said he would give publishers back their reach. We've tried several different avenues to reach out to Facebook, and I've been blacklisted for so long now. I can't even submit an internal ticket within Facebook to have them look at this. So this is it's been very problematic. Luckily, we have friends that work at Facebook, and even they can't seem to have the Facebook support team, the internal support team, help. So at this point, we're just kind of writing it off as a loss and moving forward. And unfortunately, that's kind of become the new norm within social media activism, social media journalism.
Yeah, and speaking of the point that you brought up about how the censorship that you dealt with transitioned into the COVID lockdowns and then heightening that censorship, but when they did heighten that censorship, they already went for the first line of defense, which was the libertarian type people a few years prior. So the strongest line of defense already was pretty much removed. And most conservatives at that time didn't make much noise about what was happening with you guys. And then the same thing started happening to conservatives, but arguably worse. When the collusion started with you guys, and then they perfected that collusion for the COVID lockdowns, where they would come after even your Airbnb account or something like that, for example. They would find everything that you would have an account on, and everything would get shut down essentially at the same time, and you all were the first wave that had to deal with that. And that's what I always say is that, when conservatives scream about the censorship and stuff, I like to remind them that, well, you guys weren't really saying anything when they were coming after libertarians, because a lot of you guys were coming after the libertarians as well. And then when they decided to come after you guys, the conservatives, then a lot of those conservatives realized, wow, I guess these libertarians are actually more of our allies, and they're saying more correct things than we previously thought. Like, we thought they were just these paranoid conspiracy theorists. And now look, everything they were saying is happening to us, So what do you think about that?
Yeah, man. Well, that's just the way the pendulum swings, right? And we're seeing that now again, of course. But I should mention that, well, first of all, it's kind of like that old analogy, right? Like, first they came for the activists, but I wasn't an activist. Then they came for the socialists, but it wasn't the socialists. And eventually, they came for me and there was nobody else to speak out for me. I mean, I think that's powerful. Certainly not socialists over here, but, I should probably mention that during our purge, even during that time period, the right was already kind of co-opting the censorship conversation, saying that they're the only people being targeted, and Alex Jones deplatforming certainly helped, strengthen that argument. But when you examine our pages and the group of accounts and pages that were taken down during that push, there was quite a few leftist organizations as well that got caught up in that, and even some like black flag dissident anarchists, not even necessarily like anarchists with that adjective, like it just straight up anti-state type of mentality type of people. So it wasn't just libertarians, it wasn't just the right, it was pretty wide spectrum of people. And as I was just alluding to, it's going to happen again because this is how politics work. This is how government works. And we're seeing right now the right calling for, the deportation of college students that happen to be criticizing Israel. And you think that they would learn, right? I mean, these are the same people who were just a year ago during the Biden administration crying, foul that the Biden administration was censoring them. And, that's true that we did get confirmation about that. I mean, even Jen Psaki admitted that there was, content moderation guidance going on through the White House and Facebook and stuff like that. But this is going to come back. It always does. And as each president tramples the Constitution and our rights and creates all these executive orders that create new standards and new norms, the next election, which, whether Trump gets his third term or if he doesn't, I sure hope he doesn't. We're going to see the pendulum swing back again. And this is the name of politics. This is why we always oppose a unit party, even when there's a, quote unquote freedom candidate, as they paint Trump to be, or anti-war candidate, because government is always going to reduce our rights. It's always going to crack down on our liberties, and the idea that somehow politics are going to make things better is like expecting cancer to cure cancer. It just doesn't happen.
Yes, yeah, you bring up very good points. We often discuss this philosophical conversation about political action, and as you know, I'm very open to political action, but I always like to clarify that when I say political action, I don't mean going into government and building things in government. I mean being a line of defense from the government growing, essentially. If we can multiply the Ron Pauls and the Thomas Massey type of politicians, and if we can get more people with that mindset into politics, then surely we can transition and use the political system to improve things. However, if we look from a pure philosophical standpoint, we can also see that the nature of government is something that, say, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So oftentimes when people do go into government, they go in with the best and greatest and nicest of ideas, and then they quickly change. But one of those reasons that I would think that they change is because they didn't have a strong philosophical lens when they got involved in politics. And, the people like Thomas Massey and Ron Paul are leading with their politics and not leading with their philosophy and not leading with being a politician first. So do you think that from that angle, there should be more people involved in politics if they have principles and can do the type of activism that, say, Ron Paul or Thomas Massey could do?
Yeah, so I'm glad that we are spending a second on this, because I should clarify, I'm all for the multi-prong approach. I know there's certain libertarians, anarchists out there who believe there's just only one path to freedom. I don't think it's that linear. I think that we should take the different approaches, and one of them should be political. Another one should be boots on the ground, civil disobedience, stuff like that, protests. But the third, prong, I would say, to that is changing hearts and minds. And that's something that we've always tried to do at the Free Thought Project, because ultimately, I think that's the most morally and intellectually consistent. But I am all for people like, the Mises Caucus and the people who are, involved with the Mises Caucus getting involved with politics, especially localism. if we can start within our own cities, our own towns to make change politically, as you were saying, as a line of defense against some of this encroachment on our rights and our liberties, then I'm all for it. And I do believe that's important. I do believe that there's utility there. So I'm not trying to poo-poo that at all, right? But at the same time, and this is where I'm putting on my anarchist hat, no law can make you more free, right? And so we've seen this over and over again from our friends on the right, our centrist friends, and even some of our big L libertarian friends who cheer things on, like, legalizing cannabis, for instance, which, trust me, I'm right there. I want the drug war to be over. I don't believe that somebody should be in a cage for a plant in their pocket. But at the same time, is that really a win if we're just breaking even by legalizing cannabis? Because what we're doing is basically saying, hey, you can't actually be arrested for this anymore. You can't be in a cage for that. That's the original state of nature. That's how it should be, right? So we're kind of, through politics, reversing a lot of these bad laws. We're breaking even at best. And I don't believe that, ultimately we should be codifying our own preferences into law, which is basically what a lot of politics is about. And I know you know this already, but for your audience, even the idea of democracy is, as Hans Hermann Hoppe puts it, the god that failed, right? Because if 51% of the population can control 49% of the population through coercion and the state apparatus, then that's not freedom either. So, and this is all very nuanced conversation. I know when we're hanging out, we're going on our hikes or whatever, we're always having this back and forth because it's important. It's important to talk about this stuff and kind of get to the bottom of it. And I don't think there's one perfect linear approach to liberty. I think this is a multi-prong approach. And the more people who are involved, the more people that are speaking out, the more people who are protesting and doing the civil disobedience. And that's where I kind of separate myself from the right, who hates protesters and very oftentimes doesn't even get involved in civil disobedience and stuff. I think all that's great. The culture jamming, I mean, anything that you could do to raise awareness about the state, the immoral nature of the state, and taxation and all that stuff. It should be something that we are all striving to do. But I'm not anti-politics by any means, in the sense of trying to make change through politics.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for those clarifications. Because as you know, there are many who say zero, nothing, don't get involved in the water board or the school board or anything local, But yeah, to your point, if we're going to change things, my recommendation would be, like, don't go to Congress first, go look at your local community, your city, see what elected positions are in those cities. Oftentimes they're not even elected positions. This is the problem with the overbloated bureaucracy that we have right now, is that you can just get into positions of power in government oftentimes, especially in places like California that has a huge administrative state, just by showing up. So, if people want to get involved to be that defense against the government growing, it's right in your local community. So, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Trump administration and how it was very enticing to vote for Trump in 2024 for many people who would never even consider him in, say, 2016 and 2020. But in 2024, many who are principled libertarians, for example, did end up voting for Trump. So what can you see from candidate Trump to the Trump that we see today? And what lesson can you give to these people who believe in freedom, but went with the lesser evil strategy, essentially? I mean, objectively, in a lot of ways, you can look and say, okay, Trump was objectively the lesser evil against Kamala Harris. If you were, say, a libertarian, he's talking about freeing Ross Ulbricht, which he did, and that was amazing. But on the flip side, my view now is that, I mean, this just looks like a neocon Trump administration once again, unfortunately. So what do you think about that? What's your advice to those people? And can you see what they're doing today transition to more of a libertarian style administration over a neocon one?
If I had to suggest something, it would be not to place your faith into political authority. And again, there's nuance here. I know we were just talking about the local government thing, but we should not be participating in the federal government in any shape or form, or the elections that they hold, because that's probably the most obviously rigged. And so, yeah, there's a lot there to your question. And of course, the lesser of two evils aspect element always comes into this, because that's how they rig the game, right? Is that we have to pick, and one way or another. But that's the same thing that they said when it came to Obama and Romney, right? That's the same thing that they said when it came to Hillary and Trump the first time. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we were probably backed into a corner more now than ever before, and especially hearing Kamala's cackle. I mean, Jesus Christ, I would not want to hear that for 4 years. Not that the Mango Messiah is that much better, but at least he could be funny here and there.
The Mango Messiah. I've never heard that one, bro.
Oh my God. And obviously, this is all anecdotal. I'm just trying to be humorous here, but so yeah, there's a lot of issues. And I think eventually at some point we're gonna have to back up and just stop playing that game. And I just don't think evolutionary wise, like we're not there yet as a species, as a society. But I think as long as we keep pointing to these things, right? Like the lesser of two evils game. And anytime people bring up the whole like, well, at least it wasn't Kamala. It's like, well, yeah, but that's what we've been saying for how many decades now? And like things just keep getting worse. So eventually at some point we have to wise up. Now, I do think that the MAGA movement seems blind to the fact that they're celebrating the collapse of the legacy paradigm, but Trump's also paving this way for like this new tech-driven tyranny, which also it's become completely obvious to anybody paying attention. I mean, the biometrics, the AI stuff, the mass digital surveillance, the people who he's surrounding himself with, all these big tech, leaders, and they're all sticking their hands out. They're all there as an inauguration. They all see the writing at the wall that there is a shift happening here to a more technocratic governance. And it feels like we're undergoing a controlled demolition in many ways, and some people are saying that Trump's in on it, especially when it comes to like crashing the dollar, because we're looking for some type of replacement. Some people are saying a stable coin. Some people are saying a CBDC. But it does seem obvious that even with the $500 billion that Trump has promised to allocate towards AI, that it is coming full circle into a technocratic surveillance state. And that's something that kind of concerns me, because we know damn well if Kamala was pushing a lot of this stuff, like the Real ID, for instance, if that was something that was supposed to be enforced on her watch, even though it's been pushed back since literally 2005 for 20 years now. And this wouldn't have happened under Kamala's watch. And there's a bunch of other things too. I mean, he just fast tracked the mRNA bird flu vaccine. I could probably go down the line of all the different things that like the right would be losing their mind if Kamala was involved with it, right? And that's exactly the reason why there's probably some substance to the theory that if Trump was installed, it would be because some of these policies that he's trying to implement would face mass resistance under a Democrat government, right? So if he's manufactured opposition, I think that's hard to say with any definitive proof right now. But like, if you look at like the media attacks on him, the assassination attempts and like all that stuff, and there's a lot fishy about that too, the defamation and all that stuff, man, it seems like it was like his persecution was almost staged to reinforce the belief that he is a true threat to the establishment. So if you look at it from that perspective and you think about the Albert Pike quote, which was, when people need a hero, we shall provide them one, like it does feel like this could be a whole controlled op. And I know that's getting into a larger conspiracy, and I'm probably getting my like giving off my Whitney Webb vibes right now. But yeah, I'm not convinced that this is going to be any type of improvement for freedom. Even Doge, which started off strong, has kind of stalled out at 150 billion saved. Meanwhile, Trump's touting a $1 trillion military budget. Here's another thing that nobody's talking about. Within the first week, he came into office. He signed an executive order for an American Iron Dome that he's now calling the Golden Dome, and estimates for that are 2.5 trillion. So are we really saving any money? Like, I don't think so. It doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, this seems like the typical neoconservative strategy where they pretend to be libertarians in speech, but in action, they're communists essentially. And what we're
More of the
seeing,
same.
yeah, when what we're seeing right now, I just don't see any difference from the neocon dominance that we've seen in the Republican Party in the 21st century. But while I do see that there is a massive shift happening within the Republican Party right now, say the Candace Owens type people who were previously one of those neocons, arguably, now they are actually shifting into more freedom oriented, truth oriented type mindsets. But I'm not sure if that group is large enough to essentially overpower the neocon dominance that we've seen in the Republican Party for so long, because the neocons just have so many more resources. I mean, I was in the Republican Party. I remember that battle with the neocons. They have an immense amount of resources that the others don't generally have. Um, can you see that the trend is going towards more freedom, say in the Republican Party, or do you see that this neocon stronghold is essentially going to continue on like we've seen it?
That's a great question, dude. Well, there is a shift in the populist population and culturally towards more freedom-minded mentality. And that's where it gets tricky because I think a lot of these people have been kind of tricked into believing that Trump was that catalyst to usher in that kind of stuff. And so they'll be disillusioned, just like many were after Obama. I don't think that's going to necessarily create this huge tidal wave of liberty activists necessarily, because there's a cult of personality there. And I think a lot of these people don't necessarily ascribe to the philosophy or the principles. It's more of like Trump knows how to own the libs. He's funny. We could make a meme of him pumping his fist and it's going to get, 1,000 likes. And like, that's kind of, it's more of a social club, much like the left was when it came to a lot of the ideology and some of their beliefs, like
It's very reactionary ideologies.
yeah. But I would say even more than that, so because you're almost expected to know the beliefs and participate in the mantras and kind of be on board with a lot of this stuff. And if you're not, you're just casted aside or you're a retard, according to the right, which is apparently one of their favorite words. And it's a pretty good one. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but uh, so yeah, man, it does get a little tricky as far as where this is going to lead us. I've actually interviewed quite a few people who were very disillusioned after the Bernie years from the Bernie camps. Matt Taibbi being one of them, where he was like, "Yeah, I had a little more faith in Bernie, and that's turned out to be completely, the opposite." And so I do feel like, and I should note during our podcast with Matt Taibbi, I asked him at the end of our podcast, like, "Do you feel like after everything you've seen over the past 10 years or so, like, are you more freedom minded? Are you more libertarian?" And he said, yeah, like he is more libertarian minded than he's ever been. He's more willing to, embrace the ideas and principles of libertarianism. And Matt Taibbi, man, he was a pretty mainstream guy there, and so I do think that there is a cultural shift going on. How that translates to people actually learning about Austrian economics, actually learning about how the Federal Reserve works, actually learning about the non-aggression principle and self-ownership. I don't know. I don't know how that translates. I don't know if we've made the libertarianism cool enough yet. I think we're pretty damn close. People like Michael Malice, Dave Smith, yeah, kind of maybe are starting to chip away at that, but I think that's probably our job, Amir, is to make libertarianism much more cool because a lot of this stuff, unfortunately, man, it's just the optics, like, and once you give people the optics of something being popular or cool, that's when they start to invest. That's when they start to care. But I think we're a different breed. And I know we were talking about this off air a little bit because we were inspired by the great Ron Paul, right? Like, and the world has changed since those years of, 2012 and the Paul presidency. We were inspired by trying to understand the principles of libertarianism. We were, uh, he suggested himself that we learn about economics and that we learn about Austrian economics and how that all ties into what's going on within our world, within our society, within our government, how they're screwing us. I don't believe that some of the new breed of Gen Z freedom influencers really have that foundation like we do. And it's partially not their fault. Again, nobody's reading. Video has just kind of taken off. But also, what's become more popular is just the conspiracy theories, man. And there's become quite a few people who've blown up in a very short period of time who, don't get me wrong, are doing some pretty good work. They do some really good deep dives into some important topics. But then when it comes to their philosophy and talking about solutions and how we actually get out of this mess, it's like they're clueless. They don't have anything there. They can't speak from their well of knowledge when it comes to that. And that concerns me. And so I've been kind of more recently speaking out about that as well. Because I know Ian Carroll's kind of got a target on him right now. He's just on Rogan. I'm not going to say anything bad about the guy. He seems to be, from what I could tell on the surface, authentic and genuine. He's trying to do this type of work. It almost feels like he stumbled into it some way. I know the theories are out there that he's some type of counterintelligence. He's co-opted. I don't know. There's a bunch of different ideas as far as like who he really could be and where he's from and who's grooming him and all that stuff. But I hear him and he breaks down these topics and he's got, the TikTok thing going on where he's pointing to all of his sources and references and stuff. And it seems great. And it seems like people are eating that up, which is good to a certain extent. But we also need to go a step further, because if it's just the knowledge of conspiracy theories, that's just mental masturbation, right? We need to be actively applying this knowledge to solutions, manifesting it in our lives. So I recently had a tweet here, if you don't mind me reading it. I said,
Please.
I would take Derek Bros over Ian Carroll any day. Both are talented researchers, but only one grasps his philosophy and champions voluntarism, the only morally and logically consistent ideology. Without incorporating solutions, it's just mental masturbation. And I think that's the big part that's missing right now from the equation. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad these people are creating careers for themselves and they'll probably be set for life. Somebody like Ian Carroll, he's already got like 1 million plus followers on Twitter, which isn't easy to do. But God damn, I wish that they had some better understanding of our principles and philosophy, because they could be so much more useful for the cause of liberty rather than just stroking their own brain.
Yeah, that's this shift that I'm seeing as well. It does seem harmful because you remember back in the day, there were those groups of people that were just only conspiracy focused, and over years of time, you got to witness those exact people kind of lose their mind in a sense. Like the nature of reality, just reality for them becomes so warped, and they're so in that fear programming that then everything becomes a conspiracy. Every single new thing that happens, they're trying to find the conspiracy in it. And yeah, there are a lot of conspiracies, and a lot of them are true. But when you make that your primary lens, it doesn't lead you down the right road. You won't get to the right conclusions, essentially. You're just going to be scared shitless all the time. And that's why I like to focus so much on solutions, because we already know the problems. Okay, yeah, it's an evil cabal. They control the world. There are only so many different ways that we can hear that until it just gets repetitive. And then we have to go into solution mode. But one of the things I just noticed about current human nature in general is that a lot of people live their lives with their words speaking way louder than their actions. And it's much more rare to find people whose actions are louder than their words. And solution oriented strategies take a lot of work. If you want to go do something in your local community, that means you got to get off your phone, get off social media, get up, get ready, get out of the house, go be social. And that's work. That is the action that arguably a lot of people don't want to put in. And somebody like Ian Carroll, my analysis is this guy puts out content very often. He does it in the formats that he knows will go viral. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what I'm, trying to recommend to a lot of the libertarian minded people out there who, if you do want to get bigger, essentially we have to recognize that we're playing with these controlled algorithms where in our mindset, we're thinking like, this is Facebook 2011. We can say what we want, and there is little to no censorship. I mean, there were little pockets. I remember Facebook arguably was they were censoring Ron Paul in the 2008 and 2012 campaign to the point where I started a thing on Facebook that was like we all changed our middle name to Ron Paul because they were blacking out his name. So that was essentially our workaround against their censorship. But that was arguably some of the worst levels of censorship that we would see. Whereas today, you say one wrong word and the algorithm disappears you for a month, So that's my recommendation to libertarians is that you have to play the game now. The algorithm is a game. And look at a lot of these people who have gamed the system. What Ian Carroll does, he makes these green screen videos. He just makes these basic talking videos that aren't highly edited. And then as a result, boom, they get big. So yeah, if other people are looking to go down that same road, you got to bust out that content all the time. You got to be on video all the time, and you got to do it in the styles essentially that that work with social media. Like we've talked about TikTok, for example, that TikTok strategy, us being millennials, for example, I use this term, the millennial curse, where our mindsets are still in 10, 15 years ago on the internet that we grew up in. And we haven't evolved enough like Gen Z has, for example, who grew up more on this type of internet. So we see Gen Z being much more successful in a lot of these truth-based ideas, getting them out than, say, millennials who were doing it 10, 15 years ago and are continuing to try to grow. But things have just changed so much on the internet. I mean, it's essentially you're playing in a highly controlled arena now where there's no freedom here, So if you had to give, say you had to speak to Ian Carroll or those types of people and let them know what your suggestions would be for how they can improve and provide the most effective truth and strategies to their followers.
Well, just a couple thoughts really quick first, man. Yeah, you definitely have to speak to people in the language that they're going to understand. And I think there's truth to what you're saying there. And I think some of us older generation might be a little hesitant or stubborn to get on places like TikTok for various reasons. And we could get into that maybe another time. But what you were saying there about the people really devouring the conspiracy theories, it kind of reminds me of, God, I can't remember who said it. I know Maj just talked about it in our podcast yesterday. We just had Maj Touré on, but it was like, in the Matrix, the red pill, the blue pill. It's like, which one are you going to take, right? Like, you're going to take the red pill? Well, not only did they take the red pill, a lot of these people, but they just took like the whole bottle and just like chugged it, And like, that's exactly where the conspiracy theorists kind of went to. But on that same coin, contrasting that, like conspiracy theorists have been right about quite a bit of shit, and especially during the COVID years. And so I think what it all comes down to, Amir, is the infotainment element of this. And I don't think as many people within our circles have really mastered the infotainment side of things, because it could be a bit drab and dreary talking about certain economic theories and stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, you do have to pay attention to how you present your stuff, how you package your stuff. And that's more critical now than it ever has been, because we're all fighting for eyeballs, right? Like the news feeds are more competitive now than they've ever been. So you have to be clever. You have to be witty about how you're going to present it. You have to have the hot takes. You got to have the meme hooks. I mean, all that stuff is certainly important. One thing I will say too is that we have deviated away from more of the principle-based content, which used to be more prevalent about a decade ago. And now it's just more focused on like the culture wars, more focused on the flavor of the day news that's trending, that the algorithms will pick up. And man, it just feels like it's strayed so far away from the original intentions that people like myself had for social media activism. Like it feels like it's gone into such like a cesspool of toxicity, because there's different incentives that have kind of popped up And part of it's human nature, part of it's ego, part of it's indoctrination, part of it's in-group preferences. But it feels like the social media that we once believed was going to be able to change the world has been completely destroyed. And now it's turned into the exact opposite, like where it's a place where we're divided. And, that whole Austin Metcalf story that happened recently was probably one of the best examples of that, as far as like the blatant racism going on. And not only
Yeah, can you explain that real quick for the people who don't know about that thing that just happened in Texas?
So there was two 17-year-olds at a track meet, one black, one white. Apparently, they got into some type of altercation inside a tent during the track meet, and the black individual, the black teen, stabbed the white one. I don't know all the details, to be honest, because I don't generally focus on these super culturally charged topics, because I'm more interested in the state and talking about the state. And obviously, private crime happens, but it's less frequent and it's not institutionalized. So it's like, why do we even? I mean, it's important to some people, but so more or less, it's become a breeding ground online for, and I know this gets harped on a lot, white supremacists, the conservatives who might be a little more race leaning, and probably even some of the anti-Semites and stuff like that. It's turned into a battleground where people are more or less just going ham. The divide and conquer is in full effect. And it's part of what we talked to Maj about yesterday, guys. If you check out our podcast, which actually dropped this morning, you could listen all about that and Maj's perspective on it as well. But
yeah, I just got to give a quick shout out to the Free Thought Project podcast. If you all have not checked out the Free Thought Project podcast, it is one of my favorite podcasts. It's one of the best podcasts on the planet. I say that very seriously as well. I have learned so much from the Free Thought Project podcast, because you have such unique guests on and can ask them questions in a very scholarly, intellectual way that you don't see very often on other podcasts. So shout out to you and shout out to the Free Thought Project podcast.
Thank you, brother. I often mention that I'm not like the smartest person, but like I talk to the fucking smartest people on our podcast. It's like at least I'm somewhere in that chain where it's like we're at least platforming them and giving them the voice. And even though our podcast isn't as popular as others, I do believe that we are providing a service and value there. And I would love for more people to subscribe and listen. But I know we're getting low on time here. So to answer your question, dude, I somebody like fuck is his name? Ian Carroll. James Lee, he's another one who's very similar to Ian Carroll. We just had him in our interview.
Yeah, you just had him, right? You interviewed him?
And yeah, he's great as well. He's like another one of these people who just came out of nowhere, just got like really interested in these topics and just decided to start doing like research and deep dives, and like was already kind of, smart and knew how to research before that and business savvy and all that stuff. And it was like, hey, I'm just leaving the business world. I'm going to try to do this full time. And because they're intelligent, because they know how to present it and make these, short, very smart videos that, they're getting a bunch of views now. But what I would say to those people is like, sink your teeth into the philosophy, like get in knee deep into the ideology. It is so important that, again, I said this a couple times now, but we're not just masturbating. We're not just mentally masturbating on these ideas. It's great. It's important that people understand the Epstein network and the saga and how deep that rabbit hole goes. But as you pointed out, Amir, like when does that end? At what point do we decide to evolve past that? At what point do we decide, hey, no, like we need to do something. We need to be active in our communities. We need to be involved. We need to be leading by example. We need not just be talking about these things, but actually in our communities doing them, whether it be politically, whether it be whatever. There's so many things that you could do. I mean, the list is infinite, but unfortunately, I think the ego, is a very dangerous devil that it's there. It's always there. It wants to promote you. It wants the recognition and respect that we get from creating viral content. So we have to be aware of that. We have to be mindful of that, and we need to combat that and put it into real action. That's what's going to make change, And so that will be the hill that I die on. And yeah, man, that'll probably be the advice I'd give to the next generation.
Yeah, you brought up a really great point about you used the word infotainment, and yeah, people who do value freedom and want a free society need to learn that better. It's the unfortunate reality about social media today is that if you're not good at quick hooks, if you can't get watch time, most people they're going like this, right? They're just scrolling so fast all day, and when you're a, say, scholarly, intellectual libertarian who studies from the Mises Institute, for example, and you're about to give this lecture, for example, you don't get that watch time. And then the algorithm, therefore, doesn't push you out. And then the guy who starts with, you know, this new Epstein thing that I'm going to share did you know this is, and then boom, they get you hooked in. So then you get that watch time of, say, over 15 seconds. And then the algorithm then says, okay, this gets boosted now into the next level. Whereas the other one didn't watch that because the guy said, okay, so today I'm going to talk about how Abraham Lincoln was and then you already got they already scrolled past essentially. So
Yeah.
I view it as an unfortunate reality where you essentially have to utilize more shock factor. I mean, I look at my content on TikTok, for example, and my best performing videos are the most shocking type videos. It's not the most well thought out intellectual scholarly videos I make. Those actually do by far the worst. It would be hard to break 1,000 views on that, whereas
Yeah.
my more shocking content is getting hundreds of thousands of views, and that's primarily because of that algorithm. So just to finish off, Jason, again, I want to thank you so much for being on and giving your insightful, valuable views. And I really hope that the younger generation and the older generation, everybody can learn from you right now. Final thoughts about what's happening in America right now and what you would like to see America become over the next 10 to 20 years. I personally believe that now that our generation is growing older and we are getting into positions of power and influence, we do have the ability to really shift America into a better place. I just want to know your thoughts on that and what you would like to personally see that better America look like.
Great question, man. Um, I mean, yeah, things are happening as I mentioned, and the fact that we've only had the internet for 20 years and we have challenged their systems, we've challenged their narratives is certainly a step in the right direction. It's certainly something that we should be feeling good about because that means we actually have the tool that we need for the job. And if that's actually being used in the appropriate ways, which a lot of this conversation today has been centered on, is a different story. But we have the tool, and that's important. And, things culturally are shifting more libertarian. I mean, look at Bitcoin. Look how much that's taken off over the past couple of years. I know that a lot of large multinational corporations are ditching DEI. We have an anarcho-capitalist president in Argentina. Ron Paul was advising Doge there for a while. I mean, there's a lot of good things that seem to be happening. So I think it is important that we keep the optimism and we continue to move forward. It's easy to be black-pilled. It's easy to be a doomer. But we have to always remain hopeful because that's kind of the backbone of what we're doing here. And trust me, it's not easy, especially when you're absorbing all this information, especially when you get into police accountability stuff and you're watching these videos that char your soul, but we do it because we understand that there's an importance to shine a light on the darkness. We do it because we know that future generations are being taken advantage of. They're already in debt. Most American born child is $106,000. Yeah, it sounds crazy to say it, in debt, and it just keeps going up. Not to mention the 36 point, what is it, 3 trillion that we're in debt right now. So we do need to continue to pave the way for a free society for our children. We might be the last hope, to be completely honest, especially if you look around the world and how other governments have really putting their thumb down on their citizens. And, if there's one thing that Alex Jones did get right, was naming one of his organizations Prison Planet. I don't know if that's even still going, but it used to be, because we do ultimately live in a prison planet. So And yeah, we're ruled by gangs, and unfortunately, we live in the biggest, most dangerous, country gang in the world. But what I would like to see, man, is a respect for consent, and I think that's kind of the bottom line of where this is all so important, because we saw during the COVID years a profound disrespect for consent, and we saw the establishment steamroll people who were trying to have some type of bodily autonomy. People who actually cared about their own sovereignty, people who understood that they were individuals and they have the right to make their own choices. And I believe that's going to be the war that is continued to be levied upon us, is against our own personal consent. And the wheels of the mainstream media and that apparatus, they're always finding new ways to propagandize us for psyops. I mean, the whole world is a stage, right? So never dismiss what could be happening. Never dismiss, what is possible. So always be critical, stay vigilant, and make sure that we are always fighting for consent. And definitely do not comply with the real ID. You have your battery go out?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for that answer. Mr. Jason Bassler, where can everybody find you and follow you on social media and find more of your work?
Sure, man. Yeah, I usually overdo this, so I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. TheFreeThoughtProject.com. That's our home base. At the top there, you'll see a tab for our podcasts. So check out our podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Podbean. JasonBassler.com has my own book, which I wrote, September of 2023, 3 Ways to Prepare for CBDCs. And we also just recently wrote a book here. Got it? Children's book. Yeah, I guess my camera's blurring it out, but Know Your Rights for Children teaches about the First Amendment, due process, so much, guys. So it's important that we create a foundation for our children, knowing their rights. Is one of the things that we found while doing the police accountability work, was that a lot of times the police would focus and target teens and younger individuals. And so they didn't often know their rights. So it's so important. You could get this, guys, at littlefreethinkers.com or on jasonbassler.com. Otherwise, just check me out on Twitter or Instagram. Those are kind of my 2 biggest platforms. So thank you so much for having me on, man. This has been a great conversation.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for being on. And I will have your links below in the description of this video as well for anybody listening. Mr. Jason Bassler, thank you so much for joining me today. God bless you. Cheers.